The winter air cut through Marcus Whitfield's expensive wool coat as he stepped out of Bellissimo, the kind of Italian restaurant where a single dinner could feed a family for a week. His breath formed small clouds in the December darkness, disappearing almost as quickly as they appeared. The streets of Seattle's financial district had emptied hours ago, leaving behind only the echo of his footsteps on the frozen sidewalk and the distant hum of traffic from the highway. Marcus had just closed a deal worth $12 million. The contract sat in his briefcase, waiting to be filed away with all the other contracts that had built his fortune. At 47, he'd become the kind of man whose name appeared in Forbes articles about self-made millionaires. His investment firm managed over $3 billion in assets. His penthouse overlooked Elliott Bay. His life was a carefully constructed monument to success. His phone buzzed with a text from his driver. Stuck on I-5, accident blocking 3 lanes, could be another 40 minutes. Marcus typed back a quick response, "I'll walk, head home." He pocketed his phone and started down Fifth Avenue. The cold didn't bother him much. Growing up in Minnesota had given him a tolerance for bitter weather, though back then he hadn't owned a coat like this one. Back then, he'd worn hand-me-downs and walked 3 miles to school because the bus route didn't reach the trailer park where he'd lived with his mother and younger brother. That life felt like it belonged to someone else now. Marcus was 2 blocks from his building when he saw the figure on the bench. Pioneer Square Park was technically closed after dark, but the city rarely enforced it. Homeless people often slept on the benches there, wrapped in whatever they could find to ward off the cold. Marcus had walked past dozens of them over the years. Sometimes he felt a twinge of something, guilt, maybe, or recognition, but he never stopped. What could one person do? The problem was too big, too complicated. But tonight, something made him slow down. Maybe it was the way the figure was curled into itself, so still it looked more like a sculpture than a person. Maybe it was the way the frost had settled on the dark fabric of their coat, glittering in the streetlight. Maybe it was something he couldn't name, some pull he didn't understand. Marcus took 3 steps closer. The streetlight above the bench flickered once, twice, then blazed to life with startling brightness. And in that sudden illumination, Marcus saw her face. His heart stopped. Emma. Emma Rodriguez, who'd worked in his home for nearly 3 years. Emma, who'd always had his coffee ready by 7:15. Emma, who'd never complained, never asked for anything, who'd been so quiet he sometimes forgot she was there. Emma, who he'd fired 4 weeks ago. And now she was here, lips tinged blue, skin pale as paper, her body motionless on a frozen park bench in the middle of the night. "No," Marcus whispered, "no, no, no." He dropped to his knees on the frozen concrete, his expensive suit pants soaking up the melted snow. His hands shook as he reached for her shoulder. "Emma, Emma, can you hear me?" "Nothing." Her skin was ice beneath his touch. Panic clawed at his throat as he pressed his fingers to her neck, searching desperately for a pulse. For a moment there was nothing, and Marcus felt the world tilt beneath him. Then faint, so faint he felt it, a flutter against his fingertips. She was alive, barely. "Emma, stay with me, please stay with me." He grabbed his phone with trembling fingers and dialed 911. While he waited for someone to answer, he noticed her hands. Even unconscious, even frozen, they were clasped together, holding something. 911, what's your emergency? "I need an ambulance, Pioneer Square Park, 5th and Yesler. There's a woman, she's hypothermic, she's barely breathing." "Sir, is she conscious?" "No, God, no, she's, please hurry." "An ambulance is on the way, can you tell me?" Marcus set the phone down on speaker and carefully uncurled Emma's frozen fingers. Her hands were rigid, resistant, as if even in unconsciousness she was trying to hold on to what little she had. Inside her palms, cash, a thick stack of small bills, ones, fives, tens, held together with a rubber band, maybe $300 total beneath the cash folded papers. Marcus pulled them out with shaking hands. Hospital bills, pages and pages of them. Patient name, Sofia Rodriguez. Age 9, diagnosis, acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Insurance status, terminated. Days without treatment, 23. A child, Emma had a daughter and she was dying. Marcus's vision blurred. He kept reading, flipping through the papers. Treatment schedules, medication lists, doctor's notes explaining why immediate intervention was critical, and at the bottom of the stack, a letter. Handwritten on notebook paper, the ink smudged in places from what looked like tears. "Mr. Whitfield, I'm not asking for charity. I'm not asking for money. I'm only asking for my job back. I know I made a mistake. I know I was late that morning and I broke your mother's vase. I understand why you were angry. But my daughter is dying. Sophia is 9 years old and she has leukemia, and without treatment she will die. I lost my health insurance when you let me go. I've been trying to find other work, but nothing pays enough to cover her medical bills. I've sold everything I own. I've borrowed from everyone I know. I just need my job back, that's all, just a chance to save my daughter." Please. Emma Rodriguez. The letter was dated 3 weeks ago, never sent. Or maybe she'd tried to send it and he'd never seen it. Maybe his assistant had thrown it away with all the other mail he never bothered to read. Marcus's hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the paper. 4 weeks ago, Emma had been late. She'd stumbled in at 7:45 instead of 7:30, looking exhausted. She'd knocked over a vase while trying to catch herself against the counter, his mother's vase, an antique that had been in the family for generations. It had shattered across the kitchen floor, and Marcus had been furious. "You're late and you're careless," he'd said, not even looking up from his phone. "I can't have someone working for me who can't be relied upon. You're fired. Get your things and go." She hadn't argued, hadn't cried, she'd just nodded once and left. He'd replaced her the same afternoon. The agency had sent over someone new, someone who talked too much but at least showed up on time. Marcus had forgotten about Emma Rodriguez within a week. But Emma hadn't forgotten him. She'd been waiting for him, hoping he'd see her, hoping he'd change his mind. And instead, she'd frozen to death on a park bench, still clutching the cash she'd saved and the letter she'd never had the courage to deliver. Sir, are you still there?" The 911 operator's voice crackled from his phone. Marcus grabbed it. "She has a daughter, 9 years old. She has leukemia. The child's been without treatment for 23 days. Someone needs to. Sir, the paramedics are 2 minutes away. Stay with her, keep her warm if you can." Marcus tore off his coat and wrapped it around Emma's still form. It seemed impossibly inadequate against the cold that had already seeped into her bones. He took off his suit jacket too, tucking it around her shoulders, and then he just held her, trying to will warmth back into her body through sheer force of desperation. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "God, Emma, I'm so sorry." In the distance, sirens wailed, growing louder. Red and blue lights painted the frozen trees of the park. Marcus didn't move. He just held her and prayed to a God he hadn't spoken to in 20 years that it wasn't too late. Seattle General Hospital smelled like antiseptic and despair. Marcus sat in the emergency waiting room under fluorescent lights that hummed and flickered, making his headache worse with each passing minute. His shirt was still damp from kneeling in the snow. His coat was somewhere in the back with Emma. He'd given his jacket to a homeless man outside who'd been shivering by the entrance. People kept staring at him. A man in $1,000 shoes and custom-tailored pants, sitting alone at 3 in the morning, looking like his entire world had just collapsed. Let them stare. Marcus had been reading and rereading the hospital bills for an hour. Each page felt like an indictment. Each denied treatment, each unpaid invoice, each desperate note from Emma pleading for payment extensions, it all pointed back to him, not directly. He hadn't personally denied these claims, but the insurance company that had dropped Emma's coverage, he owned 20% of it. He sat on their board. He'd voted to approve the cost-cutting measures that had flagged families like Emma's as high-risk, low-return investments. He'd never thought about what those words meant to real people. A nurse walked past, speaking quietly to a colleague. Marcus caught fragments of their conversation. "Severe hypothermia and malnutrition. She's been living rough for at least 2 weeks. Found a child in our system. Same last name, Rodriguez, 9 years old, pediatric oncology. Treatment was suspended when the insurance." "How much longer does she have?" "Days, maybe a week at most without treatment." Marcus stood so abruptly his chair scraped across the floor with a sound that made several people turn and look. He pulled out his phone, his fingers clumsy as he searched for the hospital's main number. When someone answered, he barely let them finish their greeting. "This is Marcus Whitfield. I need to speak to someone in pediatric oncology immediately. It's about a patient, Sophia Rodriguez." "Sir, visiting hours are." "I'm not visiting, I'm authorizing treatment. All of it, whatever she needs, I don't care what it costs." There was a pause. "Sir, are you a family member?" "No, I'm..." What was he, the man who destroyed her family? The man who'd let her mother freeze in the street? "I'm paying for her treatment, all of it, starting right now. Transfer me to the billing department. I'll give them my card information." "Mr. Whitfield, her treatment plan is extensive. We're talking about potentially $700,000 over the next." "I said I don't care what it costs. Start the treatment tonight. Now do you understand me?" His voice cracked on the last word. The person on the other end was quiet for a moment, then said, "I'll transfer you to our financial coordinator." 10 minutes later, it was done. Sophia Rodriguez was being moved from palliative care back to active treatment. Chemotherapy would begin within the hour. The doctors were optimistic. She'd been without treatment for 3 weeks, but she was young and her body might still be resilient enough to respond. Marcus ended the call and sat back down, his whole body shaking. He felt like he might throw up. He just spent $700,000 in a phone call that lasted less than 10 minutes. It was more money than most people would see in a lifetime, and for him, it was barely a dent. He'd made twice that in the deal he'd closed at dinner. How many other Sophias were out there? How many other families had he ignored while he built his empire? Marcus closed his eyes, and suddenly he was 24 again, sitting in a different hospital waiting room. His younger brother Daniel in a bed down the hall, 15 years old, dying of the same disease that was trying to kill Sofia Rodriguez. The same disease and the same impossible choice: pay for treatment you can't afford or watch someone you love die. Marcus had been just starting out then. He'd maxed out every credit card he had, borrowed from loan sharks, sold everything he owned, and it still hadn't been enough. The hospital had kept Daniel comfortable, but without the full treatment protocol, there was no chance of survival. He remembered Daniel's last words to him: "It's okay, Marcus, you did your best, now go build something good, don't waste this." Marcus had built something, all right. He'd built an empire. He'd sworn he'd never be powerless again, never be too poor to save someone he loved. But somehow, in building that empire, he'd become the kind of man who created the very system that had almost killed Sophia, who fired a desperate mother without asking why she was late, who walked past suffering because stopping would be inconvenient. "Mr. Whitfield." He looked up. A doctor stood in the doorway, still in her scrubs, looking exhausted. "She's awake," the doctor said. "She's asking for you." Marcus stood, his heart pounding. "Is she, will she?" "She's stable, but Mr. Whitfield," the doctor's expression was serious, "she's been through severe trauma, both physical and psychological. She's going to need time to recover and support." Marcus nodded. "Whatever she needs." He followed the doctor down a long hallway, past rooms filled with beeping machines and quiet suffering. When they reached Emma's room, the doctor paused. "Be gentle with her, and Mr. Whitfield, thank you for what you did for her daughter." Marcus didn't deserve thanks, but he nodded anyway. Emma was sitting up in the hospital bed when he entered. She looked impossibly fragile, swimming in a hospital gown, her hair tangled, her eyes hollow, but she was alive, and she was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Sophia," she said immediately, "is she?" "She's okay. They started treatment an hour ago. The doctors say she's responding well." Emma's face crumbled. She pressed her hands to her mouth, and tears started streaming down her face. Not delicate tears, but the kind of sobbing that comes from somewhere deep and broken, the kind that sounds like it might never stop. Marcus stood there helpless while she cried. He wanted to say something, anything, but every word that came to mind felt inadequate. Finally, Emma looked up at him. Her eyes were red-rimmed but clear. "Why?" she whispered. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it. He didn't have a good answer. "Why now?" Emma's voice got stronger. "You had 4 weeks. I wrote you that letter. I waited outside your building for 3 nights. Where were you?" "I didn't know. I didn't." "You didn't ask." She cut him off, and there was steel in her voice now. "That morning I was late. I'd been up all night. I was working 2 other cleaning jobs to pay for Sophia's medication. I hadn't slept in 3 days. I was so exhausted I could barely stand, and you didn't ask. You just told me to leave." "I know." "No, you don't." Emma's voice shook with anger. "Men like you don't know what it's like. Do you know what it's like to choose between food and medicine? To sleep in the street because you sold everything just to buy your daughter 1 more week? I wasn't late because I overslept. I was late because I was trying to keep my daughter alive. And you threw me away like I was nothing." Each word hit Marcus like a physical blow. He deserved every one of them. "You're right," he said quietly. "I didn't see you, but I'm seeing now." He pulled out his laptop and set it on the edge of her bed. His hands were shaking as he opened it and pulled up a file he'd been compiling since he'd found those hospital bills. "This is my company's insurance system," he said, turning the screen toward her. "The one that dropped your coverage." Emma stared at the screen, rows and rows of data, names, dates, denial codes, dollar amounts. "They've been targeting low-income families for 3 years," Marcus continued, "flagging people based on their zip codes, their dependents' medical costs. Once you're flagged, every claim gets scrutinized until they find a reason to deny it. Over 22,000 people have been affected." Emma's face went from shock to something harder, something that looked like rage. "You're telling me Sophia almost died because a computer decided we weren't worth the money?" "Oh, yes." Her hands balled into fists on the hospital blanket. "How many others? How many families like mine?" Marcus scrolled down. 57 denials just yesterday, most of them for children, most of them terminal cases. Emma closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were blazing. "You don't get to save my daughter and walk away feeling good about yourself," she said. "You fix this, all of it, every single person your system hurt, you fix it." "I don't know how." "Then you learn." Her voice was like broken glass. "You have money, you have power, you use it. Because if you don't, Sophia lives and I spend the rest of my life knowing I was saved while thousands of others died. Can you live with that?" She stared at him, and Marcus saw something in her eyes that he recognized. It was the same look he'd had 25 years ago, standing over Daniel's grave, swearing he'd never let this happen to anyone else. He'd failed that promise, but maybe it wasn't too late to keep it now. No, Marcus said, I can't live with that. Good, Emma's voice softened slightly, then let's fix it. Marcus didn't go home. For 3 days, he lived in his office, surviving on coffee and the kind of rage that makes you forget you have a body that needs sleep. He pulled every file he could access, traced every denied claim back to its source, followed every paper trail until his eyes burned and his head pounded. The deeper he dug, the sicker he felt. It wasn't just an algorithm, it was a strategy, deliberate, calculated, profitable. The system flagged people based on their economic indicators: zip codes in low-income areas, dependents with chronic illnesses, jobs in industries with high turnover. Once flagged, every claim they submitted got routed to a specialized review team whose sole job was to find reasons to deny coverage, pre-existing conditions, missed documentation, technicalities so obscure that most people would never know to challenge them. And it worked. Over 3 years, the company had saved, Marcus's stomach turned at the word, over $300 million by denying legitimate claims to people who couldn't afford to fight back. Emma's file was there, buried in the employee records. She'd been flagged 27 months ago when Sophia's diagnosis first entered the system. The algorithm had labeled her high-cost dependent, recommend termination. For 2 years, someone had overridden that recommendation. Marcus didn't know who, probably some low-level HR employee who still had a conscience. But then Emma had been late, had broken that vase, and suddenly the override disappeared. Marcus found the email chain. It was dated 4 weeks ago, the same day he'd fired Emma. From Gerald Prescott, CFO. To Rebecca Lansing, Head of Human Resources. Subject: Employee Termination, Rodriguez. Rebecca, I see we have an employee termination today. Rodriguez, Emma. Employee ID 4738. Please confirm her health insurance has been terminated effective immediately. Her dependents' treatment costs were flagged as exceeding annual threshold by 340K. Termination will result in immediate cessation of coverage and significant cost savings. Per our Q4 optimization targets, this termination is approved and encouraged. Gerald. Marcus read it 3 times, then he opened the next email. From Gerald Prescott, CFO. To Board of Directors. Subject: Q4 Cost Reduction Update. Team, I'm pleased to report we've successfully reduced dependent healthcare costs by 23% this quarter. Our targeted termination strategy continues to exceed projections. Attached is a list of employees flagged for termination in Q1. Estimated annual savings, $47 million. The attachment was a spreadsheet, 217 names, 217 families, each one labeled with their dependent's diagnosis and estimated treatment costs. Marcus felt like he was going to be sick. There was a knock on his office door. He looked up to see Emma standing there, still pale, wearing clothes that someone from the hospital must have donated. She wasn't supposed to be discharged yet. What did you find? She asked. Marcus turned the laptop toward her. She read the emails slowly. Her face didn't change, but her hands started shaking. She sat down in the chair across from his desk, still staring at the screen. They knew, she whispered, they all knew. It goes deeper than Prescott, Marcus said. The board approved these protocols 3 years ago. They've been receiving bonuses based on the cost reductions. Everyone at the top has been profiting from this. Emma looked at him. When are you going to confront them? Tomorrow, emergency board meeting. I'm coming with you. Emma, you don't have to. Yes, I do, her voice was steel. They tried to erase me, tried to erase Sophia. I'm not letting them pretend we were just numbers on a spreadsheet. She leaned forward, and Marcus saw something in her eyes he recognized. It was the look of someone who'd lost everything and found that grief could be sharpened into purpose. I'm not your redemption story, Marcus, she said quietly. I'm your reckoning. The boardroom on the 42nd floor was all glass and steel and money. 12 board members sat around a table that probably cost more than Emma had earned in her entire life. When Marcus walked in with her beside him, the room went silent. Gerald Prescott, the CFO, stood up immediately, his face flushed red. Marcus, this is a closed board meeting. Miss Rodriguez has no place. Sit down, Gerald. Marcus's voice was calm, but it carried weight. He plugged his laptop into the screen at the front of the room. Data filled the wall: names, denial rates, profit margins, death rates. For 3 years, Marcus said, our insurance division has been systematically denying legitimate claims to boost quarterly profits. The woman standing next to me nearly froze to death because of it. Her 9-year-old daughter nearly died, and she's not alone. Board member Thompson, a silver-haired man who'd been on the board longer than Marcus had been in business, leaned back in his chair. Marcus, insurance companies have to make difficult decisions. That's the nature. Her daughter has leukemia, Marcus cut him off. She's 9 years old and your system flagged her as too expensive to keep alive. Prescott stood again. This is completely inappropriate. We followed standard actuarial practices. We have a fiduciary duty. You sent an email, Marcus said, pulling it up on the screen. Employee 4738, you called her a high-cost dependent risk. You calculated how much money the company would save if her daughter died. The room went dead silent. Emma stepped forward. Her voice was quiet, but every person in that room heard her. My daughter's name is Sophia. She's 9 years old. She likes to draw pictures of horses. She wants to be a veterinarian when she grows up. Emma paused. Last week, she asked me if dying hurts because she couldn't breathe and I didn't have money for her medication. One of the board members looked down at the table. Emma didn't stop. You see spreadsheets and profit margins. I see Sophia asking me why I can't save her. Her voice cracked slightly. Every one of those 22,000 denials is someone's Sophia, someone's mother, someone's child. Thompson cleared his throat. This is clearly emotional, but we have shareholders to answer to. We can't just. I'm shutting down the algorithm, Marcus said. Today, I'm refunding every wrongly denied claim from the past 3 years, and I'm giving this board a choice. Help me fix this or find another company to run. Prescott's face went from red to purple. If you do this, we'll vote you out as CEO. You'll lose everything. Marcus looked at Emma. She gave him the smallest nod. Then call the vote, Marcus said. The room erupted. 3 board members stood and started shouting. 2 others were already on their phones, probably calling their lawyers. Thompson was demanding order, his voice getting lost in the chaos. In the end, 6 board members walked out, 6 stayed. Prescott was the last to leave. He stopped in the doorway and turned back. You're going to regret this, he said. You're destroying everything we built. Marcus thought about Sophia in a hospital bed, about Emma on a frozen park bench, about 22,000 families who'd been labeled as acceptable losses. No, he said quietly, I'm finally building something worth keeping. After Prescott left, the room felt different, smaller but maybe cleaner. Emma turned to Marcus. What happens now? Marcus looked at the 6 board members who'd stayed, then at the data still glowing on the screen, 22,000 names waiting for someone to fight for them. Now, he said, we make this right. The story broke like a dam bursting. Someone at the hospital, Marcus never found out who, leaked Emma's letter to the PR. By morning, her face was everywhere, her handwriting, her words. I'm not asking for charity, just for my job back. My daughter is dying. Marcus's phone rang nonstop. His PR team was in full panic mode. The board members who'd stayed were now questioning their decision. The company's stock had dropped 18% in 2 hours. But then the other story dropped. Former housekeeper exploits billionaire's guilt. It ran on 3 major news sites simultaneously, all pulling from the same anonymous source. The article claimed Emma had planned everything, that she'd manipulated Marcus, that Sophia's condition was exaggerated, that Emma was using a sick child to extort money from a wealthy man. The comments sections filled with vitriol within minutes, people who'd never met Emma calling her a scammer, demanding she be investigated, some even suggesting that Sophia didn't exist at all. Marcus found Emma in the guest room of his penthouse, sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling through her phone with tears streaming down her face. They're going to destroy me, she whispered. Marcus sat down beside her, careful to maintain distance. No, they're not. You don't understand. She looked at him and her voice broke. I've spent my whole life being invisible, and now I'm everywhere and they're making me into a monster. They're saying I'm lying about Sophia, that I used my daughter. Her voice gave out entirely. She pressed her hands to her face. Then we tell the truth, Marcus said. Today, press conference, you and me, we show them the medical records, the denial letters, everything. Emma shook her head. I can't, look at me, I'm nobody, who's going to believe me over them? I will, Marcus said. And so will everyone who's ever been where you are. You're not nobody, Emma. You're the person brave enough to fight back. She looked at him for a long moment, then slowly she nodded. The press conference was chaos. Reporters packed the room, cameras everywhere, lights so bright Marcus could feel them like heat on his skin. Questions were shouted before they even reached the podium. Mr. Whitfield, is it true you're bankrupting your company? Emma, how much money are you asking for? Is this a publicity stunt? Marcus stepped up to the microphone first. He'd prepared remarks, but looking out at the crowd, he realized he didn't need them. He just needed to tell the truth. My name is Marcus Whitfield. 3 weeks ago, I found Emma Rodriguez unconscious on a park bench. She was hypothermic, malnourished, holding $300 in hospital bills for her daughter. The room quieted. I'd fired her 4 weeks earlier because she was late and broke something in my home. I never asked why. I never considered that she might have had a reason. And because I didn't ask, because I didn't see her as a person with a life beyond my convenience, she nearly died. Marcus's voice caught, he pushed through it. Her daughter, Sophia, is 9 years old. She has leukemia. When Emma lost her job, she lost her health insurance. Sophia's treatment stopped. For 3 weeks, a 9-year-old child went without cancer treatment because my insurance company, a company I own a substantial part of, had flagged her as too expensive to save. Cameras clicked, pens scratched on paper. Today, I'm announcing the establishment of a healthcare advocacy foundation with an initial funding of $500 million. We'll be reviewing and refunding every wrongly denied claim from the past 3 years. We're implementing new protocols to prevent this from happening again, and we're establishing an independent patient advocacy board. He stepped aside, but you're not here to listen to me, you're here to hear from Emma. Emma stood there, her hands shaking. For a moment, Marcus thought she might walk away, then she stepped to the microphone. My name is Emma Rodriguez, she said. Her voice was quiet at first. I'm 32 years old. I've been cleaning houses since I was 19. I raised my daughter alone since she was 2. She took a breath, her voice got stronger. I worked 3 jobs to keep Sophia alive. I lost my apartment. I sold everything I owned. I slept on a park bench with everything I had left because I'd already lost everything else. The room was absolutely silent. But I'm not here for sympathy, Emma continued. I'm here because there are millions like me, people who are invisible until they're dying, ignored until they're gone. She looked directly into the cameras. This company's system didn't see my daughter's life. It saw a cost, it saw a profit margin, and that has to end. Her voice cracked, but she kept going. To everyone who's been denied, who's been told your family isn't worth saving, who's had to choose between medicine and food, I see you. We see you. And we're not stopping until every single person gets the care they deserve. When she finished, the room erupted, but through the noise, Marcus heard so. Nothing else. Outside, through the windows, he could see people gathering, hundreds of them holding signs, pictures of loved ones, names of people they'd lost. Emma's words had reached them, and they weren't going to let her stand alone. That night, Emma couldn't speak. She sat in the car while Marcus drove her to the hospital, staring out the window, her hands folded in her lap. The press conference had taken everything she had. What if she's angry at me? Emma said suddenly, her voice small. Marcus glanced at her. Why would Sophia be angry? Because I left her, Emma's voice broke. I was so busy trying to save her that I wasn't there. She's been in that hospital room alone for weeks, and I was sleeping outside on a bench. What kind of mother does that? The kind who was fighting for her daughter's life. But she didn't know that, Emma whispered. What if she thinks I abandoned her? Marcus didn't have an answer, he just drove. At the hospital, Emma's steps got slower the closer they got to pediatric oncology. By the time they reached Sophia's room, she'd stopped completely outside the door. I can't. Yes, you can, Marcus said gently. Emma took one breath, too, then she pushed open the door. Sophia was sitting up in bed, thinner than any 9-year-old should be, her dark hair growing back in uneven patches. A medical mask covered the lower half of her face, but her eyes lit up the moment she saw Emma. Mama. Emma crossed the room in 3 steps and wrapped her arms around her daughter, careful of the IV lines and monitoring wires. She was crying so hard she couldn't speak. I thought something happened to you, Sophia said, her voice muffled. They wouldn't tell me where you were. I'm okay, baby, I'm here now, I'm not going anywhere. Marcus stayed by the door, feeling like an intruder on something sacred. After a while, Sophia looked over her mother's shoulder at him. Who's that? Emma pulled back and wiped her face. That's Marcus, he's the one who made sure you got your treatment. Sophia studied him for a long moment, then she said, You're the one who fired my mama. Marcus's chest tightened. I am. But you helped me. Your mother helped you, Marcus said. I just finally learned to pay attention. Sophia looked between them, trying to understand something too complicated for a 9-year-old. Then she said, Are you helping other kids too? Marcus nodded. We're trying. Good. Sophia leaned back against her pillows. She looked tired, but more alive than she'd been in weeks. Because it's not fair, kids shouldn't have to worry about stuff like this. Emma kissed her forehead. No, baby, they shouldn't. As they left the hospital later, Emma was quiet again, but this time it was different. This time there was something like hope in her silence. The doctors say she's responding well to treatment, Emma said. They think she's going to make it. Her voice cracked on the last word. Marcus didn't say anything. He just stood there with her while she cried, not from grief this time, but from relief so overwhelming it hurt. When she finally looked up, her eyes were red but clear. What happens next? She asked. Marcus thought about the 22,000 names still waiting, the federal investigation that had been launched, the lawsuits being filed, the lives still hanging in the balance.